all of our products are strongly tied to Ali. And so we've always sort of thought about, okay, what does it look like to have a product that does have enterprise value and is detached from Ali? It's very easy to get caught up with the short-term cash of doing a cohort launch, which is all exciting and stuff, but fundamentally it's a short-term injection of cash. You need to kind of try to make it a long-term sustainable business. I open up Twitter and I see I've got a notification. Ali's tweeted, "We're thinking of building an NFT. Who's interested?" And I was just like, what? This is the first I've heard of this. One of the major mistakes we made with P2AA. Throughout, you could be a beginner and you could also be advanced and get value out of it, which is a good thing to a certain extent, but it also makes it harder to market. I wouldn't advise anyone else trying to do the same thing. We launched a paid version of the community straight off the back of cohort 1. It was like $99 a month and it was going reasonably well, but then we closed that down in June of the following year because...
Hey everyone, welcome to the Creator Apps Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Schreiber. The goal of this podcast is to educate you on becoming a great operator in the creator economy. On today's episode, I talk with Angus Parker, who is the General Manager and COO for Ali Abdaal. Ali Abdaal is the #1 productivity creator in the world with over 6 million YouTube subscribers. A former doctor turned entrepreneur, Ali has built a business by teaching everything from evidence-based productivity to intentional living and creative entrepreneurship. Today, that business generates well over $5 million per year, and Angus has been a critical part of its success. During our conversation, we talked through a ton, including 3 of Ali's products: Part-Time YouTuber Academy, LifeOS, and VoicePal. Part-Time YouTuber Academy is Ali's courses, system, and templates to help you start, grow, and monetize a YouTube channel. LifeOS is the complete productivity system to help you manage your time, beat procrastination, and take consistent action towards your goals. And lastly, VoicePal is an AI-powered tool that captures your spoken thoughts, mimics your tone, and transforms ideas into drafts in minutes. Angus and I also chat through why Ali and him shut down a thriving paid community and the hidden costs of that decision, the key person risk most creator businesses ignore and the systems they're building to fix it, what creators miss about recurring revenue and why it matters more than ever in a saturated market, and lastly, the underrated power of live cohorts and the real-time feedback that's helped Ali and Angus build better products. And now, without further delay, here's my conversation with Angus Parker. Walk me through the product development process and how you guys got to the cohort-based model, but then kind of switched off to more of a self-paced model for the Part-Time YouTuber Academy.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were kind of fairly fortunate, I think, with sort of not stumbling upon the cohort model, but one of the ways that we got there was really Ali talking to a couple of other creators who were currently running cohorts at the time. This was back in 2020, so this was sort of peak COVID time when I think cohorts were in their peak as well, and they're probably coming back into their peak now, which we maybe can touch upon later. But yeah, so Ali talked to Tiago Forte and David Perel, who each had a course, Building a Second Brain and Rite of Passage, respectively, that were doing very well. And we had wanted to, I guess to provide some context, we had started to release courses on Skillshare and they were doing very well. And that was bringing in decent money. But Skillshare, as with YouTube, is a platform that it's obviously a third-party platform. So that revenue could disappear overnight, as indeed over the next couple of years it did. Not overnight, but it's dramatically reduced, and because when they changed their monetization policies, and we have no control over that. So we always knew we wanted to create our own course. And so it was a question of, okay, do we do this as a self-paced course? Do we do this as a live cohort? And the advice that Ali got from Tiago and David was do it as a live cohort. And so the first cohort was really scrappy. I sat down with Ali on, I think, October the 20th, 2020, and we put together the basic outline of the course on sticky notes in his flat. And 3 weeks later was the first day of cohort 1. And in the interim, we sort of did a bit of a soft launch on Twitter, was our kind of main platform really in those days in terms of promotion of this course. We didn't really do it on YouTube, and also leveraging the email list that Ali had built up. And so that led to what we thought was going to be like 10, 20 people signing up for a beta cohort was 370 something. And we were very conservative with our prices on the first cohort. And yeah, it went very well, and that just led to us then repeating that for 8 cohorts, the last cohort being the most successful. It was, I think, a $2 million cohort. And then after that, we transitioned it to a self-paced course, main reason being that at that point, the cohort wave had somewhat subsided, and that was sort of paired with Ali being, I guess, teaching the same thing every single like quarter almost, or every 3 or 4 months, we're starting to sort of drain him. And so he was getting less satisfied with doing it live and everything like that. So we decided to move to a self-paced course, and that's went live in like July 2023, and it's been self-paced ever since. And we have some element that's live still in the community and things with that particular course. But that's kind of the reasoning why we moved to self-paced. And every course that we've done since then, we've generally kicked off with like a live cohort, but sort of immediately moved it into self-paced instead of setting it up as this thing that we would do every 3 or 4 months, because it's hard. It's hard to do that. And I've seen it with other creators who've had success initially doing cohorts, do like 3 or 4, and then realize that it's
challenging.
It's challenging, exactly. So that was sort of the main process behind it, really.
What advice would you give to someone in a similar spot? We're trying to figure out, do I do cohort based? Do I do self-paced? Would you still recommend maybe starting with cohort for maybe a little bit to get the learnings in? Or would you say, hey, start from some self-paced right away?
Honestly, I would probably, okay, there's 2 lines of thought here. My initial line of thought would be start with cohort based, because I think you learn a ton by actually doing it as a cohort, even if it's a cohort of 5 people. Like you learn so much by actually interacting with people. You change up the course, the material. When we did that first cohort, we were changing it week by week based on the feedback we were getting from people. And so I think there's a lot of benefit from that. The only potential reason why you would do it the other way is if you were very confident of the material, it had been pre-validated in another format, you launch it as a self-paced course, and then a month or 2 later launch a like accelerator, which is the implementation of that particular material. This was actually something which, when I was chatting with ChatGPT the other day about upcoming things, it actually suggested that kind of approach. And it does make sense. If you've got it pre-validated and you're fairly confident, then I think it makes sense. However, you do need to be confident of the product, the offer, and everything like that if you did go down that route. I think a lot of people, because I think the question of whether you do a cohort or a self-paced course is sort of the second question and the second part beyond actually have you got a decent product. And it's sort of like people often run before they can walk in terms of thinking, oh, should I do a cohort, should I do a self-paced course? It's like, well, do you have an offer first of all? So yeah, that would be my sort of thinking on that.
It's a great point too about even if you're doing a cohort at the start with 5, 10, 15 people, the curriculum might change. You might say, hey, this actually isn't hitting as much as we thought, or we should be honing in on this 20% that we've only given, very small amount of attention to. When you look back at the Part-Time YouTube Academy over the last couple of years, early on, what were maybe some of those big mistakes that you guys made that you learned from, pretty quick?
I don't think there was anything sort of glaring from the curriculum that we were like, oh, we completely misread that particular point. I think one thing that we didn't quite expect was the value of, it wasn't really a mistake, but something that we kind of learnt on, was the value that people got from video feedback specifically, as well as the value that people got from each other and the power of community. I think at that time, communities, and maybe people watching this will be like, no, communities were there for ages. But I think I still think at that time, like online communities weren't quite in their sort of as developed as they are now. You'd see the space now is replete with different platforms all trying to compete for the same space, and it wasn't there in 2020 to the same extent. And so I think we had underappreciated that, and we very nearly even didn't have a community for the first cohort. I remember having that conversation with Ali, because he was like, I don't do communities. I never engage in communities. And I was like, I think it would be useful. So community is probably one. And as I said, the video feedback, which started off accidentally by me just giving a bit of feedback to someone in the week before cohort 1 launched. And then it turned into this whole thing that everyone got feedback on every video for the first, I think throughout the cohorts actually, which was a sort of a bit of a logistical nightmare at times, but it's something people found really valuable. So I think the other thing, especially with something like YouTube or a skill-based thing it's different from something like productivity, is being really certain about the level at which you're targeting. I think we underestimated the amount of people, of like beginners, wanting to join and start and join the cohort, I suppose. I think we went into it thinking that it would be more people in sort of the 10 to 100,000 subscriber range wanting to level up to the next level and get to 1 million, which is what Ali had recently got to. And so I think if you're thinking about doing a cohort that is around something that is skill-based, it's then breaking it down to like, okay, what skill level are you actually targeting this at? I think one of the major mistakes we made with P2AA throughout we never really fixed this, to be honest, is the fact that it does. You could be a beginner and you could also be advanced and get value out of it, which is a good thing to a certain extent, but it also makes it harder to market because we can't just say, okay, this is for X person. And it's not. I wouldn't advise anyone else trying to do the same thing. And we've sort of got away with it in the sense of, like, as I said, beginners still get value out of it. And we try to signpost people towards the right things. But yeah, I think that would probably be the biggest quote unquote mistake that we made, even though it didn't really damage things too much.
And challenging from an operations standpoint too. You've got such a wide variety of people that are, how do I upload, how do I go through YouTube analytics and figure out what I should be looking at versus someone who's very, very advanced. That's challenging to support each person properly.
Yeah. And I think it did result in a framework for thinking through the YouTube journey. Like Ali has this sort of 3-part get going, get good, get smart kind of framework, which somewhat evolved out of the fact that we knew we needed to try to make it clear to people at those different levels what they should be focusing on. So there were some unintentional benefits of it, but yeah, I think in hindsight, it would have been much better to just be really clear about who this is for. Like, we've got another YouTube product now, which is like a 7-video challenge. And we're just like, if you've not made a video before, this is for you. And it's not for you if you've made a video before. So I think the clearer you can be on that target persona, the better the product would end up being in the end.
How did you guys introduce the community overall? You said you didn't have one at the start. How did you decide to introduce it? What platform did you guys look at? Because I know I had a friend tell me, and I think this is right, but the community is still on Circle. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So we've always used Circle. We actually had a community in the first cohort, and then interestingly, we launched a paid version of the community straight off the back of cohort 1, and it was like $99 a month, and it was going reasonably well. But then we closed that down in July or June of the following year because Ali felt that there was a pressure to provide content all the time and value all the time. So we shut that down, refunded everyone anything they've ever paid, and made it free. And it's been free ever since. So anyone who's joined P2A since has been able to join that for free. And we're on Circle at the moment, always have been, always have never sort of had any issues with it. I think, again, maybe a mistake. I think in hindsight, shutting that down so quickly was probably a mistake because we don't have a continuity offer for P2AA now. And I think that's something that we're like thinking about how we could develop that, and something which we've probably lacked over the past few years. And so if I was doing some sort of cohort, I would definitely have some sort of upfront cost for the cohort and then an ongoing lower fee, kind of community fee. And there's so many platforms now that make that very easy, whether it's Circle, whether it's School, whether it's, Mighty. It doesn't, fundamentally, I think all of these platforms are fairly similar. So I don't think it really matters which one you necessarily choose, although I would obviously endorse Circle. But having some sort of continuity offer is, I think, really important. And I think communities are coming back into fashion over the last couple of years, really. And the recurring element is a major attraction of them. But there is the risk that you end up feeling like you have to provide every day.
Explain continuity offer for me. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so what I mean is essentially, obviously cohorts and self-paced courses are great, but it's like a one-time fee. And so the more you can have products that are recurring and allow you to kind of upsell someone who's bought something for a one-time fee and extend their LTV by having, something like a $49 or a $99 a month community is a perfect example of that just continues their service with you. They don't drop off necessarily, and they can, as I said, extend that lifetime value. So for example, just taking P2A for us, it's $9.95 at the moment. There isn't another product that someone could go on to buy. We did have a high ticket offer, but we closed that down. But there's not something that they can immediately buy that then extends on an ongoing basis their lifetime value for us as a customer. And to a certain extent, it is to a large extent that's an issue in the sense that then it's just you keep needing to bring people through the door, whereas personally, someone who's bought from you before is far more likely to buy from you again than someone who's never bought from you, especially if they've enjoyed the course. So yeah, I think targeting that group is again something which we've need to sort of work on more, I think, over the coming years, especially as the market becomes more saturated, competition for customers just gets greater. So yeah, it's something which is really important to focus on and think about, because it's very easy to get caught up with the short-term cash of doing a cohort launch, which is all exciting and stuff, but fundamentally it's a short-term injection of cash. You need to kind of try to make it a long-term sustainable business.
Would you guys ever bring back a paid element of the community, or that ship is kind of sailed?
We would never change the existing community. We would only ever add something. So yeah, we'd not sort of suddenly gate stuff behind paywall for the existing customers, but yeah, definitely thinking about what it would look like if we had some sort of, advanced level, or, some of the things we thought about is access to the team, office hours, or that kind of thing, which people don't currently have. So yeah, it's definitely something that's not off the table. I think at the moment there's a sort of a bit of a resource issue on that point from us internally. We're just consolidated as a team, and so we're making sure that they're concentrating on the right things. So it's really more of a prioritization thing than anything else. But we're definitely not against bring something like that in, because there's also demand for extra support and extra things from the existing customers. So that's also a decent sign that it could work.
Let's talk about LifeOS, and I just want to kind of explain and level set for everybody. LifeOS is Ali's complete productivity system, and then within LifeOS, you guys have a standard version and a pro version. The standard is a one-time fee of $297, and the pro version is $347, and then $85 per month. And within the standard version, again, you get access to the course and various tools, resources, but the pro version comes with a ton, and that's really where I want to dive into. And in the pro version, it comes onboarding call with one of the experts, access to a small group, weekly accountability check-ins, access to daily facilitated focus sessions, workshops, monthly Q&As. I mean, it's a ton there. How did you guys decide to build all these features, and walk me through just the support of them on a day-to-day basis, because that's a lot right there.
It is a lot, and we've actually only just moved it to the prices you just said there on a monthly basis. Like, it used to be an annual plan, we've just moved it to monthly. So yeah, it is a lot. We have a support team. We have 3 or 4 coaches that do all the sessions, and they're sort of managed by our community manager, who's someone full time with us. The coaches are generally part time. They are all part time, and in terms of like building that out, fundamentally, we know that with productivity, LifeOS is built on 2 main pillars: vision and action. One of the main issues that I've seen with people is that it's very easy to just get consumed by consuming more and more productivity content. The next video will be the one that gives you your ideal setup. The next book you read will be the one that suddenly unlocks your potential. It's like people just don't take action. And so the whole point of actually setting this up was really to be to see LifeOS as sort of the foundation and the theory, and LifeOS Pro to be the accountability and the piece that really enables most people to take action. There are some people who are disciplined enough to take action on their own and get everything done, that kind of thing. LifeOS Pro is not for them. LifeOS Pro is for the majority of people, I would say, even if people don't want to admit it, who take the course and then don't actually do anything with it. Like, don't actually implement things like the ideal week or the weekly reflections or the focus sessions or anything like that. And so the accountability piece is really the strong pull of LifeOS Pro, and the reason we talk about it a lot within all the features you just read out there. Like, one of the common themes is just the fact that there's accountability. They're live sessions. We've got accountability kind of groups and one-on-one calls, etc. So that was the main drive behind it, really, and it's sort of evolved and grown over the past year. And again, I think to be transparent, one of the things we should have done with that when we launched it was we launched it as a cohort, and I think a lot of people bought it as a cohort, but when we launched it was sort of cohort plus 12 months membership, and so a lot of people I think bought it as a cohort, and then the community was like the add-on, whereas in reality we should have framed it the opposite way around, of this is 12-month membership and it starts with an accelerator kind of thing. But that then led to people feeling like, they'd done the cohort, they didn't get value from the community, but we didn't frame it for them to expect getting value from the community. So that, I think, was something that we definitely learned from. And if I had my time again, we probably would have done the cohort, maybe priced it at the same, but then had an ongoing, $85 a month after that, for example, which I think probably would have allowed us to keep those people who wanted the community element and not disappoint those people who didn't want the community element, but felt they didn't get value. So yeah, that was kind of one learning from it. And as I said, we've just moved to the monthly version, mainly to, there's a few reasons, but like one of the reasons issues with annual is we've only just gone through our first renewals, like back in May. And having it on a monthly basis just means we can iterate on the feedback and get kind of real time data on like churn and things like that, just on a much tighter feedback loop.
Totally. And cash flow
and
wise,
also
I'm sure helps too.
yeah, and also it just allows more people to purchase it as well. If there's an accessibility point there as well, like people were always asking for like a monthly version because they can engage in some months, they can't engage in others, and that kind of thing. So we're seeing how it goes. Like it's not something which we're set in stone on keeping it monthly if we don't think it works, but so far we've done it for like the last 3 weeks, and it certainly seems to be getting more uptake than the annual plan did, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. And is it month to month right now, or do you guys have plans to do like a 3, 6, 12-month thing?
It's month to month at the moment. We kind of might reintroduce quarterly. We might reintroduce annual, but like at the moment it's just month to month, and I can't see us reintroducing annual for a while, like at least a few months until we've kind of validated that this month to month side works. So yeah, that's kind of the situation with that at the moment. It's sort of just in, I guess, testing, but yeah.
How do you guys handle churn right now? What's your learnings from getting people on and then having them churn, asking for their feedback? How does that loop work for you guys internally right now?
Yeah, honestly, as I said, like one of the main issues with having annual plans that and also launching it as a cohort is that we've only really had one massive batch of people go through. So we had a cohort in May of last year, and we had a cohort in June, July. So we had about 500 people kind of go through the renewal process in May, and we've got like another 300 in July. So it's actually kind of hard to say, and we've only really done one round. In terms of how we handle it, we try to get as much feedback as possible, but we don't want to push people who don't want to provide feedback. Everyone has gone through subscriptions and cancelled and had the feeling of, oh, I just want to cancel. It's like I just want to leave, and we don't want to push on people who like genuinely feel like that. So we don't make it in like difficult to cancel. There are arguments in favor of doing that. We don't necessarily want to be those people who really make it hard. We try to communicate with people as much as possible. And like, it was interesting in this first round of renewals that we went through, we sent, I think, 5 or 6 emails in like the month leading up to it about renewals. And then even then there were people when it did renew who were like, I didn't see a single email. And, we're perfectly happy to honor refunds of people who have accidentally renewed and that kind of thing. But it's hard to really assess how effective our kind of approach was until we've kind of gone through more rounds, really. So I can't really give a firm answer to that. And this is really the first recurring product we've had. Again, coming back to the first point, like we've not really had a recurring product up until this point. And so that the churn will really be a focus of the second half of this year and how we can optimize things and reduce it. But I think with anything that we do, we try to be over communicate as much as possible. It's an internal team value, but it's also an external one as well in terms of trying to keep people updated in as clear a way as possible. Yeah, I think that's all you can do, and being as transparent as possible and helpful to people in terms of we have a very open refund policy as well. That also I think it probably doesn't help us from like an optimizing revenue perspective, like business, but if people have reasons they want to refund, then we're always happy to honor it.
And that's something Ali's talked about on other shows, is just having that really generous policy there is helpful. And it goes along with the thing about not making it super difficult to cancel. If you want to cancel, go ahead, and I'm sure you guys send emails to, hey, tell me about what you didn't enjoy or why you didn't do that, but not making not hiding it, not doing all those kind of greasy tactics that just leaves a bad taste. Maybe they've got what they needed and they're good to go.
Yeah, exactly. And it has been interesting, actually. There's a few people who didn't renew back in May, and we emailed all of that group again when we switched it to monthly, and a few of them renewed on the monthly basis. So that was kind of interesting and good to see. But yeah.
And that email, Angus, was just asking them about their feedback, and then was it encouraging them to sign back up? How was that structured?
Yeah, the latest email was basically structured as essentially we know you didn't renew back in May, but we've just opened up this new monthly program. If you're interested, here's the link. It's $85 a month. Like, that was literally it. There was no more than that. And yeah, that, as I said, got a dozen or so, I think, people to sign back up, which was decent.
Yeah, it's a really nice tactic. Let's talk about VoicePal, and I'd love for you to just explain what VoicePal is, and then kind of your thinking around monetization and how that's evolved from info products to now software and AI.
Yeah, so it's interesting. But VoicePal kind of evolved out of a sort of hobby that Ali, a side project that Ali and his friend Pablo are working on, and then it's become this software has become this sort of new line of the business, really. Especially, well, I guess we're mainly in charge of like the growth side, and Pablo handles all the operations and things. But I guess on a zooming out slightly, one of the things we've always struggled with and thought about, struggled with is maybe too strong, but thought about is the fact that it's a personal brand, it's got key man risk. All of our products are strongly tied to Ali, even like the YouTuber Academy. And whilst it's possible to survive like that, it does mean that, as I said, there is a risk right at the heart of the business. And something like the YouTuber Academy, again, I'll use that as an example. It doesn't. Someone might come and offer money to us for it, but no one ever has, and I don't expect someone would. Has been some evidence in the past of courses like Creator Now being bought, but I can't see it necessarily happening. And so we've always sort of thought about, okay, well, what does it look like to have a product that does have enterprise value and is detached from Ali? And we've done various projects over the last few years. Some have been, well, yes, some have got further than others. We at one point we tried to build out a whole sort of business around this part-time element of Part-Time YouTuber Academy and building out more channels and courses in that direction. But we eventually scrapped that after like a couple of months of preparing to launch a new YouTube channel that then got shelved. And so we've always had this. And for us, sort of when we look at the space and how things will evolve over the next few years, I think personal brand distribution and trust coming underneath the personal brand element will become unbelievably valuable as AI makes information more available, makes products easier to build, and that kind of thing. Distribution will be key, because I don't think AI is able to like affordably impact the distribution point. Really, it's not as easily, at least. Maybe I'm being naive there, but I don't think I am. So software really is the obvious next step, and it's something which Ali had always wanted to go into at some point, and we just didn't have like the right opportunity. But then this sort of development with VoicePal, which had started off as a side project, but then got sort of traction in the beta testing phase, and people were enjoying it, especially creators. And it's become this AI ghostwriter in your pocket, and it's doing very well. It launched like last August, and it's kind of on track to be about sort of $1 million ARR by probably like end of Q3, start of Q4, I suspect, within like 13, 14 months. So it's doing very well. And our kind of plan over the next couple of years is to build out a bit of a small sort of studio of very targeted productivity-based apps. We've got no real interest in raising money or going for like a big swing of like, a Notion size productivity app. Like this, it's just not worth trying to compete in that environment with needing to raise hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars. And so we're going after sort of, small, more targeted apps with the aim of getting like 3 or 4 or 5 to that $1 million ARR mark and strongly cash flowing. And if someone comes in to buy them, or to buy one, we're always open to that. And they have enterprise value in that sense. We're not aiming to tie them just to Ali. We're kind of using Ali's brand to help promote and launch them, but we're trying to consciously make sure that they're not dependent on him from a marketing perspective. And VoicePal certainly isn't. That's grown very organically, broadly. We did a survey in November, and I think something like 40% of the users surveyed in that particular point like hadn't heard of Ali, which is great. So that's sort of the aim with the software. As I said, we're trying to launch 2 or 3 a year for the next couple of years. The next one is due to come out as we speak, literally tomorrow, but it will be out, I'm sure, by the time people listen to this. So it's called Super Focus. It's actually already out on the App Store, but that one is sort of a app blocker meets time tracker, and I think that's got a lot of potential actually. And so that comes out tomorrow, and then another one in September is the plan at the moment. So it's kind of exciting. It is a very different space to the info product space. It's a lot to sort of learn in terms of the marketing is very different, but it's one, it's come back to that recurring revenue point, and two, it's got enterprise value. And I just think, as I said, distribution will become more valuable, and the distributive power or the leverage that distribution can provide is more felt in the software space than in the info product space. Plus, the other thing is, like, with an audience the size of Ali's, like something like the apps are more affordable to way more people than the courses, and so we can reach more people too, which is also great.
I think there's so many good points that you just made there, Angus. The one being, and I want to come back to how you guys are building these, what partners you're working with, how you're building these internally, because I think there's a lot to learn there. And I've had a couple of conversations with other people who are coming from the software world, the AI world, in the traditional space, and coming into the creator economy and helping creators build these different software and tools. So I want to come back to that, but I'm curious I just want to say the mitigation of key person risk here, I think, is the biggest thing that you guys are trying to just handle, along with the enterprise value of that. Would you advise someone who has, got a really solid YouTube channel to start with the software and the AI versus some of the courses? Because in my head, I think it's the courses and the info products are really great foundational pieces and help you guys in a number of ways, cash, all that kind of stuff. That's been the last 4 or 5 years. And now you're transitioning to this. How do you advise, or what would you recommend someone think about the steps there? Is it cohort based, or info products first and then get into software and AI? How do you think about that?
It's really hard. It really is. There's not a particularly helpful answer, but it depends. I think it depends on the creator, the niche, the product they want to create. One of the great things about AI is that it has made products a lot easier to develop, but that's also meant that it's created a big market of people going to creators now saying that they can build certain things. I've seen it with people coming to us about products, and I think there's a lot of like very good developers in there, but there's also a lot of people just kind of, vibe coding and that kind of thing, which is fine. I'm not saying anything against that. And it's great that AI is enabling that. But I also think that it could lead to this sort of proliferation of creators thinking that jumping on the first opportunity, a bit like whenever I advise creators about sponsorships, it's like, don't just jump on the first sponsorship you get because it looks promising and like they're giving you money, because fundamentally it might not align with your interests or your kind of morals or whatever. And two, it will take way more time than you think in terms of actually doing it. And the same with people partnering with creators, or creators getting approached to do these software things. Do you want to tie your brand very, very closely to a particular product? And I think that's the risk that you run by going down that route, is that the product becomes dependent on you. The developers ask a lot of you to promote the product, and suddenly it becomes this sort of tense relationship rather than something which is very collaborative, very organic, I suppose. So it's not a particularly helpful answer, because I think there are certain people going to creators and certain creators with certain audiences where going down the software route makes way more sense than going down the info product route. There's greater chances of sort of life-changing monetization than going down the info product route, for sure. I think one of the reasons that we've been thinking about it is just, info products, whilst we could still raise the peak that we've got to, it's never going to rise exponentially. Like, it's not just going to suddenly, like, Peter Ray is not going to go from making 5 million a year to like 50 million a year. Really, I don't know if that's even anyone in the world could necessarily do that for it. But something like the software, I mean, again, 5 to 50 might be a bit of a jump, but certainly it has more chance for exponential growth. And as I said, more chance for exit potential, which again, for a creator is life-changing money. So going back to my initial comment, it really does, there isn't a firm answer I would give to creators, but I would say that if they're being approached by anyone like external, to be extremely, I was going to say careful,
diligent.
But diligent, I think is the right word. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people have, I like to think most people have the right intentions and that kind of thing, but I think it's just diligent about the value that they're providing. I think it's exactly the same as I would say with sponsors. I think fundamentally creators, coming back to the value of distribution, hold a lot of the cards, and they should value themselves and think about how they want to associate themselves in the next like 2 or 3 years, or who they want to associate themselves with brand wise over the next like 2 or 3 years. And also don't rush, because I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities over the next few years for creators to take advantage of building something collaboratively with people. And so they don't necessarily need to jump at the first person that comes into their inbox saying that they're going to build this app that's going to make them millions.
Yeah.
It's probably unlikely that's going to happen, and they need to be selective. And we've been very fortunate that sort of ours has, again, come organically through partnering with someone who we've known for ages and was looking for the next opportunity, and it just worked out very nicely. But that's not the same for everyone, and I think it's probably a space that will evolve. I think there might even be some sort of marketplace in the next couple of years, I suspect, trying to match up creators with like developers or teams or apps. I think there's a big opportunity there, in the same way that it's, we've seen that space filled in the sponsorship space with agencies and stuff. So yeah, I think there's opportunity there, but being diligent is the key.
You mentioned outside people helping you guys with the AI product stuff, with VoicePal and other items. Do you guys plan to always have it kind of externally? Is there plans to bring it internally? How do you think about that?
No, we always plan to keep it how it is, which there's a chap who's kind of leading all with development, who's third time founder, is experienced in this area of software development, and I've learned a lot from him as well, which has been great. But he's got way more experience in terms of hiring devs, designers. He got contacts in the space. It's just there's so much such strong advantage of doing that than me and Ali trying to work out, okay, who do we need to hire to build this app? And I think in the past we'd always thought that was really the main bottleneck and problem when we've thought about software in the past. Like, well, we don't really have experience with this, and so we're trying to hire people who we don't actually know who's good, who's bad. Ali's
if it's good,
got design and coding experience and stuff, but he's not really highly developed software engineer and that kind of thing. So we're working with this guy who's then running all of the apps and hiring very small teams for each of the apps individually, generally just a designer and a developer. And that's kind of how we're operating things, which means it's not quite internal, but it's close enough. Like, I live about 10 minutes away from this other chap, and we meet up very regularly about like how we can integrate the brand and the apps together more closely. So yeah, it's a very good partnership, but one which has come about more by probably luck than judgment per se, because we've just like known each other for a while. Yeah, but we have also thought about like how can we help other creators with these apps and this distribution. It's something on our mind of like, is that another product that even we could look into facilitating, also matching service, I guess, that we could look into facilitating. So that is on our mind as well, of like, could we build out this design developing studio into something else? But that's further down the line. We want to concentrate on getting our apps ready and out first before we look into that.
Yeah. And this agency or however it's structured, how do you guys, if you can say, how do you guys structure incentives so that they are aligned? Is it just more like a fee, per app, per hour, that kind of stuff, traditional agency, or is it a lot of they've got upside too if it performs well? How do you think about
it's all kind of equity split. So I won't go into the exact numbers, but yeah, like it's all like equity split, and the team have a share, like not the team operating on it have a share. So yeah, it's like that really.
Yeah. And the reason I ask, I think it's just important for other creators. Again, the split is personal to each individual business, but I do think it's important to align incentives. And I think that's where agencies can just get themselves in a little bit of trouble of, all right, you pay them the fee, you give them the 50% upfront and then 50% after, and then what happens if there's problems going forward? And then you're getting into more and more stuff. I think while those structures of ownership and of percentages are more complicated, and you have to make sure that you're getting into bed with the right person, when they work great and they become win-wins.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also why it helps that the closer relationship you have with that person, the better, in the sense of like the trust is very high. And so that also helps. But the incentives, I think, is really important just from a just generally like both internally within our own team, but also in this sense, the talent that we've been able to attract has been helped by the fact that we've had that equity offering.
When it comes to brand deals, Angus, I know you guys have worked with some different parties in the past, but I'm curious how you approach that. Similar to this, where there's a lot of different ways to do it. You can go with a typical agent. You can go with a lot of different agencies will do it for you. How do you advise creators, and how have you guys approached brand deals, whether it's hiring it out and having an external party do it, bringing it in-house, or there's a kind of a combination of both?
Yeah, we have kind of a bit of a blended approach whereby we handle about 80% of the deals, and an external agency brings in about 20%. And it's quite a nice setup because there are certain it's partly a resource constraint thing for us. We are a small team. I handle all the sponsorships. If I had all the time in the world, I reach out to way more people, but I don't, because I've got to manage the rest of the team as well. Over the years, we've been sort of full-time with an agency, full-time doing it ourselves. And so we've kind of gone through kind of all the models. I think one thing I will say for most creators is agencies are attractive in the sense that they have contacts, they have existing contracts, and therefore it reduces the load on a creator needing to go out and make these partnerships, do all this outreach and that kind of thing, which does take time. And, when I'm advising creators, I'm like, work out how much time a video usually takes you. For example, on YouTube, if it's 10 hours, it's going to take you a 50% extra. So it'll take you 15 hours to actually complete that video because of all the back and forth that you're going to have to do. I usually say that in relation to how they're pricing themselves, making sure they're not getting sort of ripped off, especially when they're smaller creators. But that's one of the advantages of the agency, is that they can take that sort of stress somewhat off your plate. But the disadvantage is that incentives aren't always directly aligned between a creator and an agency. Like, the agency want to kind of maximize revenue. Creator might want to slightly reduce their asking price for a particular integration because they want to work with the brand for a longer period of time and they want to make something work. And so there are those small frictions that I have sort of seen with other people, seen sometimes with our own staff. Nothing kind of major with our own staff, but sometimes those emerge, can hold a creator back. So I'm always like, go with an agency if you really feel like it's worth it. I think I would try to, if I was advising anyone, see if they can make it like non-exclusive, so that if a brand does come directly to them, they don't need to go through the agency. But I know a lot of agencies don't work like that, and it's not always possible. But if they can do it all kind of in-house, or get like someone who's a consultant or contractor that they trust to be able to handle it all, that is sometimes a better option. Certainly we found that doing it all in-house just saves kind of quite a lot of money as well. We do probably between 800 and 1 million a year in sponsorships across like all our content. If we were giving away 20% of that to a brand, like an agency, it's like, it's a lot of money. And so we kind of do the economics on it from that perspective. And, if I did have more time, would we get larger deals? Would we reach out to more people? Maybe. Would it more than offset 200K? Probably not. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we think about it.
That's super helpful. I think there's no right answer for every single creator. I think, just like you're saying, you have to figure out what works for your model. And I think for smaller creators, it can be beneficial when you're time constrained, but you also have to be really careful. And I think there's just a lot of agencies and a lot of bad actors and a lot of, like you're saying, a lot of misaligned incentives that the agency needs you to take every deal. They want you to take every deal. And that's where it just starts, like you're saying, there's just so many little friction points that start to add up.
Yeah, exactly. And, one of the things, we've never had any experience with bad actors, but I completely know where you're coming from and have heard horror stories in various places and things. But one of the things that we've had issues with agencies is just the communication, lines of communication. Brands sometimes work with agencies, and then you're working with an agency. And so suddenly there's like 4 lines of communication for sort of one Instagram story. And it's unbelievably frustrating sometimes how long it can take just to get one thing out. And suddenly you're like, this wasn't even worth it. Like, we've just spent way too much time on this that it's genuinely just not worth it from a business perspective. So yeah, there are some other frictions like that, which I think are often underappreciated. And going back to what I said earlier as well, I think especially if you're a new creator and you're just getting sponsorship deals coming through, like the attraction of suddenly being paid to produce content is unbelievable. But that's where there needs to be this sort of discipline of really staying true to kind of true to like valuing yourself, as well as like what products you actually want to promote, and taking that self-reflection to be like, I am actually promoting a product. Because I think a lot of creators just think, oh, it's a thing, I get paid for this, and but they are promoting a product to their audience. Like, are they okay with that? Is it something that they would want to endorse anyway or want to use anyway? And then is that brand effectively valuing them? And there's so often they just don't. And so I'd recommend like Justin Moore stuff on sponsorships.
Yeah,
and his book is really, really good.
Yeah, I've listened to a couple episodes with him and Jay. Really good perspectives on how to approach it, especially like you're saying early on. It can be really lucrative to just take every deal out there.
Yeah, exactly. But it ends up, kind of you end up shooting yourself in the foot in terms of workload, and that's why I just think it's so important to value yourself appropriately.
Yeah, the workload thing I think is definitely not talked about as much, like you're saying, for one Instagram story and that's why I do think for some creators having those minimums is important, right? Is it worth doing one reel or one integration for a lower price when the brand is difficult to work with? I think the ease of working with brands and agencies, I think, is so undervalued. And Tim Ferriss talks about it all the time. If they're difficult to work with, it's an automatic now. It doesn't matter how much money it is, because it just is such a strain, not only time, but then your team just feels drained by those particular people.
Honestly, there's a few brands that we work with who are just such a breeze to work with. And it means that when they have a question, or when they're like, we've seen our stuff, acquisition costs increasing, it's like, okay, I want to continue working with this team because they're just so easy to work with. How can we make this work? Whereas if someone's difficult to work with and they're like, oh yeah, acquisition costs increasing, it's like, okay, fine, well, we'll go elsewhere then. So yeah, it matters a lot. I certainly value it a lot. Ease of working with people is huge.
Yeah. I want to talk about some of the team building side of things, the operations and scaling. Over the past 5 years, your guys' team has fluctuated from 3 people in 2019 to 19 in 2021. And now I think it sits at 9 or 10 people today. What have been the biggest challenges to finding that sweet spot? And I know you've talked about this, Ali's talked about this. That sweet spot is hard and comes with a lot of stress financially, but then also with having to potentially lay people off and say no to things. How have you guys found that balance?
We've struggled to find the balance, even though the advice out there is, it's so true. But it's only when you go through it you realize, oh yeah, that was right. The best way I've heard it described is that Daniel Priestley, who we've worked with a bit, has described it as sort of the ideal team size being 12 or 13 people, because beyond that you get into this place where between like 30 and 40 is what he calls, I think it's 13 and 40, it might be 13 and 50, but that kind of area is what he calls the desert, when you're too big to be small and you're too small to be big. We've often walked into, continuing the metaphor, walked into the desert without like actually thinking about, okay, do we actually want to get to 40 people? And then got a bit of the way in and realized, oh no, this is not kind of going well. So as you said, yeah, we expanded a lot in 2021. I think one of the mistakes we made there was we sort of mapped out the org chart, as anyone kind of would when they suddenly realize that it's a business and we want to actually do this properly. And we hired for every kind of seat without thinking that actually the best thing to do in a startup is that most people wear multiple hats, and we probably could have, as we found out, function with 12 or 13 people rather than trying to hire 19, and the expenses went up. Revenue didn't necessarily correlate with that. And so we had to kind of let some people go in 2021. And then we sort of made a similar sort of error in going up to 19 people this time sort of last year. And over the last sort of 6 months, as some people have left, some roles become redundant, kind of mixture of both, and we've not rehired for those roles, and we've come back down. So we've sort of gone up and come down and gone up and come down. But I think the lesson really is like the 12, 13 number is just really, really true. Like I don't know how else to describe it, but once we've gone beyond 13, we get 14, 15, and that jump from 15 to 20, so many things just start to like fray. Not necessarily like we haven't noticed like tensions or anything like that, but it's more like lines of communication. Suddenly one part of the business doesn't know exactly what another part of the business is doing, and is also probably not even interested in what other part of the business is doing. And it's just layers of management come in, which mean that like messages are like filtered a number of times, like both up and down. And it's just hard. So yeah, we've now gone back down to sort of 9 and 10, and it's just a lot easier as that sort of flat structure to build the business that Ali wants to build, which is far more like lifestyle business rather than a performance business. If you're going after the performance business, then that does require, maybe 40, 50 people. You have a squeeze on margins, but your aim is to really take it to sort of 10, 20, 30 million. And that's not really our aim. And I don't think has ever deep down Ali's ever sort of necessarily wanted to take it that way. Of course, if it did go that way, we wouldn't say no necessarily, but I think the simplified lifestyle business is really what he wants to build and is served by a smaller team. And for some creators, that could be 3 or 4 people. It doesn't need to be 10, 12. I don't think you need that many people, especially if you don't have the sort of complexity of a content team and a commercial team as we do. But yeah, I think that the magic number of just not going above 12 is a lesson that everyone should take. And if you do go above 12, have a plan to get to 40. Yeah.
Who do you think should be those first couple hires for a creator once they're in a good spot that they've been doing it? Who do you think those first 2 or 3 should be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if you're a YouTuber, then editing is definitely one that should be just taken off your plate as soon as you can. Beyond that, it's hard to describe, but it's essentially the role that I fulfilled with Ali initially, which is a bit of a generalist who is happy to do anything really and get involved with anything, whether it's, I was hired as a writer, very quickly taught myself how to edit so I could edit one or 2 of the videos a month so we could continue the output that we wanted. But he's also happy just getting involved with admin and operations and that sort of thing. So it's sort of like a general operator, I would say, who is clued up enough, especially if you've got products, to have a good idea of like what a funnel is, for example, and be able to use all the standard tools that you would expect from someone in that particular position, but also be happy to, as I said, muck in and get involved with anything. And is not particularly precious about the fact they've been hired to do this one thing, because as a startup, which most creators are, you need to be able to be a generalist, really. And I think as you grow, then it's time to bring in more specialists and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think the first hire should either be editor if you are predominantly video based, and if not, then probably a operator who can write, essentially. And I know that's pretty broad and it's hard to find, but that's really what I would probably suggest.
Totally. Yeah, someone who can be scrappy, someone who can jump in on a lot of different levels, like you're saying. Coming in as a writer versus working on brand deals. You're doing everything under the sun, and Ali's talked about it in the past, but he's used a cloud analogy of, and I don't know who gets the credit for it. I'm sure you know, but the analogy is essentially you've got the clouds and Ali's above the clouds, you're below the clouds, and if Ali has to come below the clouds, something's in trouble, something, went wrong. What have you learned from being that person in between? Because that's a very challenging role, to be the connector between the founder and the leader, and then having to distribute that message, distribute challenging things to a team as well.
Yeah, honestly, 2 books I would recommend. One is Traction, which was sort of a general operating principle, operating guidebook, I suppose. But the sort of connecting book to that is called Rocket Fuel, which is essentially about the relationship between the visionary and the integrator, how they call it, which is like Ali visionary, I'm the integrator. And it's quite funny reading through like the characteristics that they describe in both of those sort of map more or less one-to-one onto Ali and I. But anyway, it's been as tricky sort of managing up as managing down in many respects over the last few years. And we have now got to that point of like Ali being above the clouds. We've been in that point for like the last year and a bit. But I think Ali struggled early on as well in terms of wanting to get involved and, throwing, as we used to say, sort of, little snippets into Slack that just sort of would throw everyone off the scent on something completely different and something completely random that then disrupts everything. And he's got much better at sort of funneling most things through me, and then whenever we have sort of team-wide meetings or team-wide updates, then he would give it direct to the team. So we definitely got better at that. But I think it's, as I said, it's as much about teaching, helping the creator and / entrepreneur learn that the best way of actually moving the business forward is to have this level of systems and formality, and that's hard because they've got to where they are by not having those in place. And so there's a natural instinct to be like, well, got here by not having it, so why can't we get there? But having some level of systemization and crucially prioritization. I know that Alex Hormozi talks about this a lot, but I think we've increasingly seen over the last 4 years just how important that point is. Like, there is always the most important thing to be doing at this precise moment, and there shouldn't be anything more than that. And we still don't do that properly. I think we still could learn from that, but I think that's also an important point with this like above the clouds thing. It's making sure if he gets distracted, that the team don't get distracted. And the team only get distracted by his ideas if they're like good, and we actually want to bring them below the clouds. One thing that we implemented a couple of years ago is we've got this like Notion board, which is called Ali's Idea Island. And it's just like anything that anytime he has an idea, he can just like chuck it in there. And he knows that he knows that I see that. And so there's a degree to which he can get it out of his head and feel like it's been seen by someone, which I think is as much of the issue as anything really. And that just provides a space and also time, because a lot of the ideas that he has and has had over the past like 5 years, sometimes they just like 72 hours later, we say like, okay, so what about this? And that's just an idea. I'm not really interested in doing that. And so that's helped a lot and provided a bit of distance. So yeah, that would be like a one small tactic that is useful if anyone is like struggling with this sort of thing. But yeah, I think that's it. That's been the main thing in terms of like distributing messages to the team. Again, it's just a over communication point. I think there's still points where we like step up on that, but we're always very open about the fact that we do whenever we do, but I don't think we do very often. And I write a weekly memo to the team on a Monday morning, which goes out to everyone. Anytime we do like major updates, we obviously use Slack as a team. And so the communication is like a big point for us. So yeah, just try to keep the team as updated as possible, but it's often not easy. We've changed meeting structures and how we do meetings every like 6 months for the past few years, trying to iterate and improve every time. But it's hard. And even with 10 people, messages still get missed and that kind of thing. So yeah, don't really have a firm like solution to all of that. But certainly like the managing up, I think, is almost more important than managing down at that level.
Yeah. Ali's Idea Island, I think, is a brilliant name, but it's also, I think, so important for anyone who's whether you're you're an early stage employee at a regular, non-creator focused startup, but whenever you've got that dynamic of you're the in between, you've got the visionary and the people doing the work. Like you said, a lot of the times the founders and the entrepreneurs, they just want to be heard. They've got a million ideas and they just want to know that the team heard the idea. And like you said, they could wake up 2 days later and be like, yeah, no, I don't want that idea. I was just talking. And meanwhile, you've got 5 people on the team who have already started ideating around how we're going to make this come to life. This is going to cost this much. It just sends people on a wild goose chase. And shiny object syndrome, I think, is it's beautiful in a way, but it is so challenging if you don't know how to corral it correctly and you don't have someone like you who can corral that person, because it just causes so much stress on the team below. And if you do it too much, you burn people out and you just make them really exhausted because everything becomes so fuzzy. And a lot of times it becomes one of these things where the founder and the leader starts to be ignored because it's a little bit of a boy who cried wolf situation. They come out with so many ideas that never come to life, and you just kind of start to ignore them as someone who's trying to help that person. So having a structure around it is just crucial, and having the person be heard is crucial as well.
Yeah, just two things on that. To that last point around the kind of boy require wolf point. The other thing that we've noticed as well is like if the more you throw stuff in, the more you change direction, the less certain people are of like the project they're working on right now is going to be the one that reaches like 100% reaches the end, and that then even I don't think there's like been examples of people doing it consciously, but even subconsciously, people end up sort of just being like, okay, but is this going to see itself out, or is there going to be another idea that kind of derails all of this? And the other point you mentioned was, yes, in terms of the creator just sort of saying, oh, I was just saying that. I think there's an education piece as well on the weight that people put on different people's opinions and discussion points. Ali, for example, everyone weighs his opinion far more than he thinks they do because it's his personal brand, it's his business, and that was certainly like an educational point, I think, for him to learn and appreciate that when he says something, people take it way more seriously than he probably thinks, and so he needs to like double caveat if he really doesn't want them to take it seriously, or if it is really just a throwaway idea.
And you're that filter. Yeah. You're that filter.
Yeah,
I feel like where
exactly.
he can go to you and say, I've got all these 20 ideas for the next 6 months. And that's where you guys have, I'm sure, a really good relationship of saying, all right, dock these 19 and let's maybe look at this one for the next couple quarters. But so important to have those processes. You talked about ruthless prioritization and saying no. Tell me the story about NFTs and just the draw to potentially want to get into that, because I know a lot of people in a lot of different spaces were similar thing. The shiny objects that was NFTs.
Yeah. Wow, what a time to be alive that was. It's kind of like it's one of the only times I've ever lost sleep in this job. Like, luckily it's been nice aside from that. Yeah, I mean, it's so basically to set the scene. It's early 2022, February 2022, I think, roughly. NFTs are like the thing at that point. Crypto's going wild. Everyone is coming out with some sort of NFT, and it all looks a bit dodgy from my perspective. And I wake up on Sunday morning, and there's not a message on Slack. There's nothing like that. And I have notifications turned on for whenever Ali posts on socials and stuff. So I open up Twitter and I see I've got a notification. Ali's tweeted that we're thinking of building an NFT. Who's interested? And I was just like, what? This is the first I've heard of this. And for the next like week or so, again, it kind of linking back to the previous point, it was sort of a bit of an idea of his that was just like, oh, this would be kind of fun to do, and looks like it's potentially profitable and everyone's doing it. And I was like, no, this is not something we want to do. It's not something that's like on brand. After a lot of back and forth and a couple of meetings with people who were more informed about this space than I was, I managed to talk him back from pulling the lever. And yeah, we didn't end up going with it, luckily, because as everyone knows, like a couple of months later, everyone forgot about NFTs, and the crypto market collapsed, I think, a couple of months after that. Yeah, we really dodged a bullet with that one. I'm so glad that we didn't go down that route. But yeah, that was one of those moments where he definitely needed sort of corralling from an idea that escaped the what's the word? Yeah, it's just escaped the confines of Slack and got onto Twitter, which was, I think, the concerning thing for me.
What did people say about it initially? I'm sure everyone was, yeah, you got to do it.
I actually can't remember what the response was. I just think I was in such shock about the tweet. I didn't even read the replies. No, I actually can't remember the sentiment of the replies, but I just knew it just wasn't us, and it was like shiny object FOMO kind of vibe. And yeah, it wasn't us, and yeah, I'm just glad we didn't go down that route. And luckily, nothing before, nothing since has come up where I've had that same feeling of just like, this is not us. So yeah, but that was an interesting one.
Yeah, prioritization is it's a hard road. It's hard to say no, and especially when the whole world is saying yes to it and saying this is a good thing.
Exactly. And there's evidence that, you know, people are in the same space are kind of sustainably building a business out of it. Like I do get it, but at the same time, I didn't get it with that one in particular because it just all seemed a bit kind of House of Cardsy and was all going to tumble down at some point. So yeah, I'm very glad we didn't move forward with it.
I've got a few more rapid fire questions here, Angus, for you to wrap up. I know we're a little over. The first one here is, if you could go back to your first year with Ali, what's one thing that you would do differently?
Weirdly, one of the immediate things that comes to mind is learn to code. And that sounds really random, but I do think that it's always been something on like the to-do list. And I learned how to edit very early on with Ali, and I kind of wish at that point I'd also learned the basics of coding. Because although there's so many tools out there now that allow you to just build stuff without having any coding knowledge, I actually do think people in the best position are those who have a basic understanding of what's going on and can leverage those tools. So sitting where I am now in 2025 with all the tools that are out there, I would love to be able to have a basic understanding of coding. You know, you might say, why are you going to learn it now? It's like, I definitely could. But I think if I'd learned it 5 years ago, then that would have compounded a lot. In terms of other things more broadly, I mean, kind of 2020, 2021, I probably would have been taking a different approach to the sort of hiring the business, building the business out as we did, as I described earlier, in terms of like not hiring for positions, but just hiring good generalists who could fill multiple positions. Yeah, those are probably the two main ones, I think.
What bad recommendations do you hear in the world of creator operations and just creator economy in general?
Great question. Bad recommendations. It's not necessarily bad advice, but I think there's still a misconception amongst a lot of creators who are trying to sustainably monetize that things like memberships or physical products, which were sort of the early stage of monetization in the creator economy, are the best ways to monetize, because I don't really know why they think that. But I think that's a massive like misconception still. And there's still people who are trying to, you know, bring out physical products, physical merch, that kind of thing. And that for me is just, it's not taking a particularly long-term view of your career as a creator. And so I think it's more that most creators aren't there intentionally, and that I say most creators, maybe that's a bit of a mischaracterization, but a lot of people like grow organically and have grown a following, and suddenly they have millions of followers. And I think there's then a desire to sort of not a desire, but they don't see it as a career necessarily, and they're not thinking 5-10 years down the line. And so the short-term prospect of getting cash through the door with one-off deals for brands, or with creating physical merch that literally has zero margin, can be appealing. So it's less bad advice and more cautionary advice, I guess, for creators on the up, is like, consider it a career and consider how you're building out the business as a business model, rather than just how do I get to next month.
My last question for you, Angus: the need for really good operators and really good generalists like you is critical. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, there's going to be more and more potentially platforms and tools that connect the two, operators to creators. What advice do you have for those who want to be in operations for a single creator or a creator-led company?
I think I would say, don't be afraid to reach out, but put effort into your outreach. I see a lot of people, even in kind of my DMs, reaching out with sort of one-line summaries, or even like massive blocks of text, which again, both are equally bad. The best cold email I've received in the last year was from someone, this guy based in India, who we've not actually hired, but I still talk to because I thought he's got potential. I kind of feel like I want to keep him on in case we ever need someone. But he sent a relatively short email, but it had a Loom attached to it that was basically breaking down Productivity Lab in terms of like what we could have done differently. So Productivity Lab was LifeOS Pro, former name. What we could have done differently with the launch, and how we could change things moving forward. And it wasn't just a sort of his regurgitation of like $100 million offers, but in the form of a presentation for you. It was actually well thought through. And clearly he had thought about the brand, thought about brand voice, thought about the style, thought about what Ali likes. And it was very good. And I couldn't offer him a role because we haven't had anything that would fit. But I have stayed in touch with them, as I said. And so I think I would encourage everyone to sort of take that proactive approach. Don't go down like the kind of just spray everywhere, everyone to see who you can work with. Be kind of direct with who you want to work with. Be clear with the value that you can provide.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Creator Ops Podcast. If you're interested in chatting more about the creator economy, send me a message on LinkedIn or email me at thomas@creatoropsmedia.com.